I didn't make a scene. I didn't raise my voice. I just set the envelope down on the table, right next to the untouched cake, and watched my stepfather's face go completely white. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My father died 2 weeks before my 9th birthday. I remember the exact moment I found out, because I was in the middle of tying my left shoe. The bow kept coming undone, and my aunt came into my room and sat on the edge of my bed without saying anything for a long time. She didn't have to. The way she sat, like all the air had gone out of her, told me everything. His name was on the life insurance policy. So was mine. My mother told me that much, and then she told me nothing else for the next 11 years. She remarried 14 months later. His name was Gerald. He had a son from his first marriage, 2 years older than me. Built like a linebacker even at 12. The kind of kid who never got in trouble because he always managed to be somewhere else when trouble happened. Gerald moved in with a lease and a U-Haul and, apparently, a full replacement plan for everything my father had left behind. I want to be fair. I don't think my mother was a cruel person in the way people imagine cruelty. She never yelled, never locked me in a room, never withheld food. What she did was quieter than that. She made me feel like a footnote, like I was a chapter from a book she'd stopped reading and moved past. Gerald's son got the new laptop when school started. I got the old one with the cracked hinge held together with a binder clip. Gerald's son got the bigger room when we moved to a new house in my junior year of high school. I got the room above the garage that smelled like motor oil and had a window that wouldn't close all the way. And when I asked my mother, once, just once, what had happened to my father's life insurance money, she looked at me the way you look at someone who said something slightly embarrassing in public. That took care of the family, she said. The family. Not me. The family. I stopped asking after that. My aunt, my father's sister, not my mother's, lived 40 minutes away in a small house with a vegetable garden. She took more seriously than most people take their careers. She called me every Sunday without fail. When I was 16, she started saying something at the end of every call, the same thing. Like a sign-off. You know your dad loved you. Don't let anyone make you forget that. I didn't know what she meant for a long time. Or maybe I did know and I just wasn't ready to. She never came to family dinners. My mother never invited her. College applications were a nightmare. Gerald made just enough money that I didn't qualify for most need-based aid. But he had absolutely no intention of helping me pay for anything. And my mother backed him up with the kind of silence that is worse than agreement. I got a small scholarship from my high school, worked 25 hours a week at a copy center through all 4 years, and took out loans for the rest. My mother called me twice during college. Once when she needed my social security number for something tax-related. Once when Gerald's son graduated and she wanted to tell me about the party. I graduated with a degree in accounting and $34,000 in debt. I moved to Cincinnati because the firm that gave me an offer was there, and also because it was 5 hours away from my mother's house, and that felt like the right amount of distance. I didn't tell her I was leaving. I figured she'd piece it together eventually. The years after that were mine, and they were good. Not easy, there's a difference, but genuinely good in a way that surprised me. I paid off my loans in 6 years. I got promoted twice. I found an apartment I actually loved, on the 3rd floor of an old building with original hardwood floors and radiators that clanked every morning like they were announcing the day. I had friends who were funny and kind. I had a life. My mother called sporadically, maybe 4 times a year, always briefly, always about something adjacent to me rather than about me. She'd mention that Gerald's son had a new job, or that they were thinking of getting a dog, or that she'd seen something on the news about accountants. Never, "How are you? What does your apartment look like? Are you okay?" I stopped grieving that around year 3. Some things you let go not because they stop hurting, but because holding them isn't doing anything useful anymore. My aunt kept calling every Sunday. And one Sunday when I was 29, she said something different at the end of the call. "I need you to come visit," she said. "There's something I've been keeping for you." I drove out on a Saturday in October. She made soup and wouldn't let me help with anything, which was her love language. We ate at her kitchen table and talked about everything except whatever it was she wanted to tell me. And then she went to the back bedroom and came back with a manila envelope, thick with paper, held shut with one of those metal clasps. She set it down in front of me and kept her hand on it for a second before she slid it across. "Your father came to me," she said, "about 3 months before he died. He knew he was sick before your mother did. He didn't want to scare anyone, but he wanted to make sure." She paused. "He trusted me to get this to you when you were ready. I decided ready meant you had your own life first." Inside the envelope were 2 things: a letter in my father's handwriting, shaky toward the end of the lines in a way that made my chest hurt, and documents from an investment account he'd opened in my name when I was 4 years old. He'd kept contributing to it right up until he couldn't anymore. It had been sitting there, growing quietly for 20 years, managed by a financial advisor my aunt had been in contact with the whole time. The total, as of that October, was $214,000. I sat at her kitchen table for a long time without saying anything. The soup got cold. My aunt handed me a box of tissues without comment, which is exactly what you want someone to do. The letter said a lot of things. It said he was sorry he couldn't be there. It said he was proud of me for things I hadn't done yet, which somehow made it worse and better at the same time. And near the end, in handwriting that got smaller and more careful, it said, "Use it to build something. Don't let it be taken from you. It's yours." I drove home in the dark and didn't turn the radio on. What I did with that money is the part that matters, and I need to explain it correctly. I didn't blow it. I didn't even spend most of it right away. I sat with my accountant brain and I made a plan, and the plan centered on one thing: a condo in a building about a mile from my office that had just come on the market. 2 bedrooms, a parking spot, a balcony that looked out over a small park. The price was $198,000, which was slightly below market because the previous owner had been an estate sale and the buyers wanted a quick close. I paid cash. I want you to understand what that felt like. I want you to understand that I had spent years watching Gerald's son get handed things: cars, tuition, down payment help, a security deposit on his first apartment, while I worked my way through every single financial milestone alone, quietly, without anyone asking if I needed a hand. And then my father, who had been dead for 2 decades, reached across all that time and gave me a foundation. I stood in that empty condo with the keys in my hand, and I said thank you out loud to nobody. It felt necessary. My mother called in February, about 4 months after I bought the place. It was a Wednesday evening. I was making dinner and almost didn't pick up. She said, "Your stepfather and I are having our anniversary party in April. We'd love for you to be there." They were celebrating 18 years. I did the math automatically. I always do math automatically, and noted that 18 years meant they'd gotten married when I was 11. I'd been in the wedding. I'd worn a dress that itched. "It's going to be at the Hargrove Room at the Whitfield Hotel," she said. "Saturday the 14th. We're expecting about 60 people." I said I would think about it. My aunt, when I called her that Sunday, said, "You don't owe them anything." "I know." I told her I know. "But you're going anyway," she said. I told her I hadn't decided. She made a small noise that meant she had already decided for me and was waiting for me to catch up. I went. Of course I went. I drove 3 hours. I wore a dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion. A deep green wrap dress that I knew I looked good in, because I am a person who has learned, slowly and with great effort, to acknowledge when I look good instead of deflecting. I had the envelope in my bag, not the original one from my aunt. A new one, addressed in clean block letters, sealed. The Hargrove Room was exactly what it sounds like: cream tablecloths, centerpieces with white flowers, a bar in the corner doing brisk business, and 60 people who all seemed to know each other very well. I knew approximately 4 of them. My mother looked good. She'd done something with her hair. She hugged me when I came in. A brief, efficient hug. The kind you give to someone you're glad has shown up without being sure why. And then someone called her name from across the room and she turned away. Gerald found me near the appetizers. He shook my hand with the energy of a man who had never once in his life been asked to account for himself. He asked how the drive was. I told him fine. He said he was glad I'd made it and then pivoted immediately to telling me about his son's promotion at work. I smiled. I ate a stuffed mushroom. I thought about my balcony and the park. Dinner was served at 7. I was seated at a table toward the back, near a couple I'd never met, and an older woman who fell asleep before the entrees arrived. My mother and Gerald sat at the head table with his son's girlfriend, and a few people I assumed were Gerald's work friends. Midway through the speeches, Gerald's brother was mid-toast when this happened. My mother stood up and asked for a moment. Gerald's brother sat down, looking mildly startled. My mother thanked everyone for coming. She talked about how much this marriage meant to her. She talked about Gerald's son and how proud she was of him. She talked about building a life, about second chances, about family. She didn't mention me. Then someone at the head table said something I couldn't quite hear, and my mother smiled in my direction, not at me, toward me, like I was a landmark, and said, "Our daughter made the trip from Cincinnati. She's always been a bit of a wanderer, never quite settled, but we're glad she's here. A bit of a wanderer, never quite settled." 60 people glanced in my direction. I kept my face completely still. I had spent 30 years learning to keep my face completely still. Gerald's son leaned over and said something to my mother that made her laugh, and then he looked at me and said, loudly enough to carry, "Still renting, or did you finally figure out the whole adulting thing?" It landed like he meant it to. A few people at nearby tables shifted in the particular way people shift when they witnessed something unkind and aren't sure if they should react. I picked up my water glass. I took a sip. I set it down. Then I reached into my bag and took out the envelope. I walked to the head table. I want to be honest about this part. My heart was going about twice its normal speed. But my hands were steady. My hands have always been steadier than my heart. I set the envelope down in front of my mother. She looked at it, then at me. "A gift," I said, "for your anniversary." She looked at Gerald. He looked at the envelope. There was a beat of hesitation, the kind where you can see someone deciding how to play something, and then Gerald said, "We appreciate the gesture, but we don't need anything from you. Why don't you just go enjoy the party?" Not a question, a dismissal. "Open it," I said. I kept my voice light, conversational. The voice I use when I'm explaining something complicated to a client and I want them to understand it without feeling stupid. My mother said with an edge I recognized from childhood, "This isn't the time." "I think it's exactly the time," I said. The room had gotten very quiet. 60 people were trying to look like they weren't watching and failing completely. Gerald's son was watching openly, the way he'd always watched things he expected would go badly for me. My mother picked up the envelope. She opened it. Inside was a document, a property transfer record, notarized, dated 3 weeks prior. The condo, my condo, the one I'd bought cash, the one with the balcony and the park view and the radiators that clanked, had been transferred into my aunt's name, not theirs. My aunt's. My father's sister, who had guarded his last gift to me for 20 years, who had called me every Sunday, who had made soup when I needed to cry. Below the transfer document was a short letter, which my mother read once, then read again. The letter said that I was aware my father's life insurance money had been used to support a household that did not include me in any meaningful way. It said I had built my life without any assistance, a fact I was proud of. It said that my father had, in fact, left me something, not through my mother, who had not known, and that what I had done with it was my choice, made freely, made well. It said I was removing myself from the guest list for any future events, not out of anger, but out of clarity. And it said, the last line, which I had written and rewritten 4 times before I got it right, "I forgive you. But some things can't be walked back, and I've stopped trying to walk backwards." My mother didn't say anything for a long time. Gerald's son said, "You transferred it. You just gave away your condo?" I looked at him. "I gave it to someone who earned it." He opened his mouth. He closed it again. The stuffed mushrooms were probably still on the side table, and I found myself thinking about that, which is what my brain does when adrenaline peaks. It finds something mundane to hold on to. I picked up my bag. I said goodnight to the older woman at my table who had woken up for the transfer document reveal and seemed to be enjoying herself. I walked out of the Hargrove room. My mother called that night. I didn't pick up. She called the next morning, and the morning after that, and then Gerald called twice, which I hadn't expected, and then Gerald's son called from a number I didn't recognize, which I also didn't pick up. The voicemails were predictable. The first wave was wounded. "How could you humiliate us like that? In front of everyone, after everything we've done." The second wave shifted toward bargaining. "We want to talk. We want to understand. Can't we sit down together?" The third wave, from Gerald's son, was the most interesting. He wanted to know if there was more money, and he didn't phrase it elegantly enough to hide that that was what he wanted to know. I listened to all of them once. Then I deleted them. My aunt cried when I told her about the transfer. Good tears. She clarified immediately. She has the accountant in me. Always clarifying. She said my father would have loved this outcome. I told her she deserved a place with a balcony and a parking spot, and she said she'd always wanted to live closer to the city anyway, so the timing worked out. I still drive out every few weeks for soup. Now she drives in sometimes and we walk through the park near what used to be my building, and I point out my old balcony and she says your father would have loved this city, and I say I know and I mean it. I'm not going to tell you I don't think about it. I'm not one of those people who packages grief into a clean narrative where the hard feelings are entirely resolved. My mother is still my mother. That word still carries something I can't fully dismantle, and I've stopped trying. But I also know this. My father made a plan for me when I was 4 years old. He sat down and opened an account and started putting money into it. And he knew something about how the world worked, and how people work, and what I might need, and he gave it to someone he trusted to give it to me when I was ready. That is the kind of love that doesn't need to announce itself. I paid off the last of my student loans the year before I turned 30. I have a new apartment now, still in Cincinnati, still with good light in the mornings. I have a promotion I worked very hard for. I have Sunday calls and soup, and a small garden I started on my new balcony. Nothing as serious as my aunt's, just a few herbs, and one tomato plant that is doing surprisingly well. I have a life that is mine all the way through, with no asterisks. And I have a letter in my father's handwriting in the top drawer of my bedside table, and sometimes I take it out and read the last lines, the ones about building something, about not letting it be taken. It's yours. It was. It is. It always.